Welcome to this very special Yoke Magazine conversation today with my friend Rachel Hunter. I'm contributing editor Tatyanna Wright, and we are talking about beauty, grace, yoga and Mother India. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
The role of beauty in your life, because it's been significant. I mean, you've been in it since, what, 16?
16, yeah. It was something completely unexpected. I was actually a ballerina. Like, I studied ballet and I was also an athlete in school, and I was very quiet, very much a introvert, and I wasn't into makeup, I wasn't into hair, I wasn't into any of that stuff whatsoever. In fact, a complete dislike to any of it. So when I got found on the beach when I was 16 and I was running, because I would run 10 miles a day, and this guy came up and I was like, well, that's kind of a creepy thing to say to someone, like, you should model, right?
And I just been checking you out from across the beach.
Yeah, that was weird. And so I was like, what? Yeah, no worries, that's fine. And then, for whatever reason, it all just started unfolding, and it unfolded fast. And the next thing I knew, there were people coming down from New York and Paris and all over the place. So it was something that I had no control over. And the next thing I was doing Vogue in Australia and all these different campaigns and stuff. So it wasn't something that I pursued at all. But it took me to New York at 17 years old, where I modeled, and I got off the plane and thought I was gonna go on go-sees, I guess that's what they called them back then. And I got off and I was working with Elle Magazine. I mean, literally was handed it, like, literally was like a silver platter in some ways.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? Because it's like when things align in your life, whatever it is, it just steamrolls, right? And it can just be dished up, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's...
And it was interesting, because now when I go back and I look at some of the, I mean, especially having studied some of the things that I've studied here, especially with the Jyotish and stuff, that you start seeing what unfolds and why it unfolds. It becomes really obvious. Clear, that you have to trust with the way life processes and flows.
Yeah, for sure.
And as much as it was hard, because I mean there was hard times when I was, when you, like everybody has those moments that are hard, but then along comes something that becomes such a gift. And anyway, that was really unexpected. And isn't that the truth though? When things come along, it's usually when you don't.
It's amazing, because with you, and I'm guessing that's how the idea of True Beauty came about, because you had this whole immersive experience from such a young age with one aspect of beauty, and then as an older person, as a woman, not a teenager, not a child, you're like looking at beauty in a new way, right?
Well, no, it interestingly enough became a completely different, because I grew up in a very spiritual household. My mother was very much a psychic. We grew up in a very esoteric family. She was very much into readings and clairvoyance, tarot cards, nature, pagan, like you name it, we kind of did it, as well as we became Mormons. Well, no, we didn't become Mormons. We looked into becoming Mormons. And then Presbyterian, then born again Christians, like, and Buddhism. So there was a lot of spiritual
exploration.
Yeah, and I was very, very grateful. And I remember being 10 years old going, this is in the front seat of my heart, and I'll never forget when I was standing, I want to receive the Holy Spirit. I want to speak in tongues. And that goes back to, that's what I was used to. So the spiritual connection became very, first of all, we'll get into that later, but I don't think there's anything separate about that. It was something that was very much a force in my life, very, very, very young. Yeah. And I think it is a force in everybody's life. It's not just,
well, we
somebody.
That too, I think, we're all born as such amazing spiritual beings. And
exactly.
Through whatever conditioning and situation you're born into, we lose that.
Yeah. And so the part that came around with that, after going through I had, an amazing marriage. I had some, my children, and Renee and Liam. And then basically, again, another part of my life fell through. I got into a relationship that I ended up no longer being in. I had back surgery. I had some really bad health problems, which were really intense. So at that time, and my career wasn't going great. you know, I mean, you're looking at 20, by that stage, 20 years in the business, and everything was just bottoming out, falling away. And I was someone who is that type of person who, you know, it's like a horse with a broken leg, it'll keep running. You know, it was that type of person. So I really had to stop, and when I stopped, I was like, you know, I need to go back where it started for me. I need to go back home. And so I flew back home. I ended up doing New Zealand's Got Talent. The producers from there said, you know what, we've got to create another show. And I said, well, I want something spiritual as well as, and she goes, well, we've got to put the beauty in it as well. So therefore, Bettina, who was the producers for New Zealand's Got Talent, we created Tour of Beauty, and away we went around the world, and we uncovered so many different aspects and really brought people into not the superstars of the world that are, you know, that everybody kind of associates with, like this person, the superstar surgeon, or the superstar this, or the superstar that.
The famous makeup artist.
Yeah, it was not about that. It was about the people that come from these lineages of, you know, healing and knowledge from the earth. And then we would go to some of the scientists. I mean, in LA, we went to a doctor who's been studying fasting for 20 years at USC, and he's got incredible studies with the fasting mimicking diet. So we really got to see a lot of the diversity of what beauty is. And of course, after you start looking at it and after you start processing that, you start just revealing everything is obviously inner. And our biggest organ is our skin. And that we don't even think of.
No.
You know,
I know.
We don't really realize that the biggest organ is the skin we walk around in, and how much that needs to be honored and give a lot of reverence to, and the fact that what we put into it, you know, all those sayings that we hear all the time. So it was a beautiful entry point for a lot of people.
Well, during the filming, had you been to India before you filmed for Tour of Beauty?
No, India became somewhere where I remember, I'll never forget, I was in Fiji and I was like, we have to go to India. And I was like, we need a guru too. And so I said to my sister, she'd been following Sadhguru at the time, and she goes, and then she accuses me now of saying, you stole my guru. Anyway, we went south. We went and looked at the Ayurvedic. We interviewed Sadhguru, and my love for India, the very first place that I actually came to in India was Varanasi.
Wow.
And the very first person who I turned TV on was, you know, Sadhguru talking about Kashi. And so...
Before you even went down to see him?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
So there you go, there's another meant to be, right? Yeah.
It just keeps
But
going.
how interesting that Varanasi was the first place, because you know, from a visceral perspective, it's multi-sensory.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on. There's beauty. There's, you know, a certain smell.
Yeah.
There's colour. It's vibrant. There's all sorts of stuff. There's poverty. There's wealth. All kinds of things. So how was that when you landed there? How did that impact you? Because you literally, you know, you're there. I know for myself, but for you, how did that make you feel and go, wow? Because you now have an amazing relationship with this country.
When I first arrived, I never forget when I got off the plane, the smell here hit me, and I literally remember wanting to almost like drop to my knees and start crying, because then in front of me was all the yoga postures. When the gate that I arrived to, there was like these yoga postures.
And this is at the airport.
Yeah, and I was like, where am I? You know, and then I got out of the gate, and it was just intoxicating, because basically when I walked out into the street, it was the first time that I felt like me, because everything was completely stripped. It was a renouncing of yourself, the renouncing of anything that anybody has any association with you, because you almost, as you come into that airport, you are almost birthed, because nobody knows, there's this beautiful moment of transformation, and I don't even think I realized that moment existed until I spent more and more time here, that
Were you practicing yoga back in LA
Yeah.
where you were living at that time?
Yeah.
You were? Okay.
So I'd been doing yoga about 13 years by that point, and my meditation practice was basically in my asana practice, which is what I thought yoga was. In fact, I'd get really triggered when people would be like sitting there like this, and I'd be like, they don't even know what that means. I bet they don't even know what that means. Like, who? I'm so busy like caring about why that person's like posing, because I thought they're posing in that, you know, and really obviously someone who knew what that was, they were in that position for a reason, and it's a very important position to be in. Yeah. But I was getting all sticky, was like, do they know? And honestly, I later realized that when you do get triggered in that way of being angry or accusing, is because you want to know. So you want that information. That's how I see it.
So at that moment, I guess you didn't have the insight at that time to know you were going to come back and have this journey, right? So when you reflect back on that, I know a lot's happened in that time, and that's like how many years now, but
yeah.
And then what was that point when you went back to LA and you started going back to the yoga studio? Did you think, because something inside of us stirs from that practice.
Yeah.
We go in, most of us in the West are introduced to yoga either by going to a gym, right? Or a friend goes, come to do yoga, or something else as simple as, wow, I really feel like I'm going to try something different, right? And you go and you do the yoga and you practice and you're holding that pose and you can feel the energy in your body moving around. And it doesn't happen immediately because some people, whatever's going on in your life, depends where you're at, where that energy is resonating, right? And how it's moving through you. So I guess what I want you to share is that moment after, whether it was around your mother's passing, that you went, wow, I need to investigate what's happening inside of me. What is this that's moving, and come back here and really get into this whole expression of yoga, which is life-changing.
When I arrived in Varanasi, and it was where, obviously it's a city where liberation, salvation, and we got to meet some of the people that moved there to eventually pass, because that's where liberation, Varanasi, right?
Yeah, they burn all the bodies as well there.
Yeah, and it's probably where a lot of my heart is, because I love that city. I love that city. It's a very intense city, but to me there's just so much burning and heat and transformation there.
Yeah.
Because of the heat and the fire.
Have you done the oven there?
No, I wouldn't do that.
About what that is in a oven, because that needs setting up what a oven is and how, man, I really want to get into the ritual aspect. But come back to your journey of yoga. How did this unfold?
Well, because basically we were there May 21st, 2 years before my mum's passing, and my mother passed 2 years after I had come to the city of Varanasi, to the day that I was in Varanasi, which is the irony of it. Every time I wanted to come back to India, there were things that came up. One being that I nursed my mum with my sister through her passing. So her cancer came quick, so we nursed her through that. I knew at that moment when she passed that I had to, on a cellular level, literally like a rag, consistently squeezing the grief, not attaching to the grief, always honoring my mother, but not getting that wrung out. And the only place I knew that it was possible to do that was in India. And I thought, coming back here, that the asanas were what wrung it out. Little did I know there's a lot of limbs of yoga.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about this right after her passing, and you were asking about coming here. And but I'm glad it's amazing, because it's such an incredible experience of reconnecting us with ourselves.
It is, and I think that too. To stay in grief becomes really hard, because you feel like you should be in grief because you miss and you love that person so much. But the part is that I want to move that through my body and always honor her in a really positive way. And yoga was the only way I knew that could move that, because of what I had experienced just in the asana practice. And the asana practice, I believe, especially in the West, because of our nervous systems as such, is a beautiful entry point because of the movement, because of the reconnection to the breath, because of the slow movement, depending on what practice you do. Yeah. But it's a beautiful entry point. So and that's what happened.
It's beautiful because I think we have to leave our comfort zones of the West and experience other things. And there's many methods. I think we're only familiar with, Kundalini as taught by Yogi Bhajan, but really here in the Himalayas there's so many more expressions, as you know. Yeah. What's your, what has been your favorite in this practice? Like, because there's many.
Well, yeah, I came here to Sattva and came to do the 200 hour to understand what the asana was, and little did I know that we then started doing these things called kriya and pranayama and mudras, and just the full conversation, like the full, there was times when I was definitely not so sure, as like, oh my God, where, there's an instability, but then at the time that's where growth is, and moving through those kriyas, which are action, with the body, like, being able to move the navel. So there's many different ways of the Kundalini as such, to move that energy and really activate that life force that's within us. So you're really looking at the aspects of the pranayama, the meditation, full value. It's like only using your right hand for the rest of your life. Yeah. You need to have access to your full body, your full being, and I think that's what the practice here allows you to do. And you can play with that, and you're going to be drawn to certain things, and then in your practice you start going, well, why am I drawn to that and I want to sit and do that all day? And then I realized I need to go back to a strong hatha practice because, you need a strong body. Yeah. So it's beautiful that all the aspects are encouraged and taught. It gives you the availability to really look at the full body of yoga.
And there's so much more though than just those, because you then learned how you became an initiate in ceremonial aspects of yoga, the rituals, right? Yeah. And that's really cool.
Well, I became a temple rat.
Yeah, which is amazing. And then also Jyotish, so you've done, and which is Vedic astrology, and now these are practices that take a very long time. So this is not like hey, now I can go and I'm this. These are lifelong studies. I mean, yoga is really a lifelong study. Yeah. When did you decide you wanted to teach yoga?
I think it just fell into happen. I never wanted to teach yoga, and I think like the whole idea of the ritual, when I was growing up, I had my mum who was very much, I went and learnt pagan with Laurie Cabot, and who's a witch in Salem, Massachusetts. So I was always really loved the esoteric. And let's not forget that with the Vedas, the nature, the fire, the earth, the air, the water, the space, all those are very natural things that we can associate with. So the elements became a really grounding
Well, Tantra has
source.
A lot of feminine aspects to it.
Yeah.
And really worships the divine feminine with the goddesses and the goddess temples. And I mean, look at where we are. I mean, this is fertile. We are sitting in the seat of fertility right now.
Yeah. And I think when you start working in those qualities and you start looking at those qualities are also within, right? So there's the earth, the matter. So we know what the elements are. And I think when you work with those, you can really learn so much about yourself, because there's so much subtlety in just watching a river, and I know some people sit there and go, oh, it's okay for you. You can go sit in the bottom of the Himalayas and look at the water and look at the sky. But that kind of evolution of consistently moving on a human side and the spiritual side, there's no separate. They both are together and they both need to merge and grow. And if you just take 10 minutes a day to acknowledge those huge steps in your own being, I think, when you acknowledge that is within is without. Yeah.
So where do you think yoga in the 21st century is going then, both India and in the West? Because there's so much that in the short time you've been transforming yourself.
Oh, it's huge,
refinding yourself, really. where do you think, what do you tell people when you go to New Zealand to teach?
And there's that stillness of really, the meditation practice as far as just sitting still as an entry point, really taking time. If you're going to go in as an entry point to the asana, taking that time, being slow with your breath, and really figuring out what you are drawn to, what you like. I think there's so many aspects out there for us to go to now, and we're lucky. And again, like, being rigid is unfortunate. We want to really be open and expressive. And even talking about like Kundalini energy, again, like I said, was talking to you today about it. That entry point was when I was young. And there is that name of Kundalini, but I think no matter what, it's spiritual energy is in us, no matter what religious, and we don't want the dogma around it. We just want to express. Yeah. So I think to find your full expression, to find your way, to find your own natural being and existence of how to fully flourish is really, really important. And that is an individual way and an individual expression that eventually becomes so abundant, because you just become a full expression of yourself, and let that be your journey.
And you can see that with your journey. You can see that how you've transformed yourself through this expression of yoga. And I know you really enjoy teaching pranayama. Because the breath is so important.
So powerful, yeah.
Yeah. So share a little bit about why pranayama? What was it about it that you latched onto?
I read...
I don't want to say latched onto, but enjoy.
The force behind the breath, I think with the Upanishads, which is a book that I became very, very in love with,
yes.
Is, all the senses were discussing how important they are, all their ego attachments, and then breath came along and said, well, I'm just going to leave. Where are we without this life force? And right. You can create heat with it, you can cool it. So to be able to play with your own life force is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, and there are so many pranayamas. Oh God, they're sort of, they're.
And also you can do them with mudras.
Totally.
And the subtle breath practices and that connection to your own self, to be able to drop your diaphragm, really feel that expansion that happens, because I think that's what happens is great expansion when you settle that, and you can settle your nervous system with that.
What's the most profound thing you've learned or received from the yogic teachings?
To be silent. To be still.
And Rachel walked around last few days with a stillness
because I changed it. Dog tag. Because I changed it from silence to stillness. Because, do you know, it's funny because it's been a journey, this stillness, silence. But I think, constantly listening to people's and your own, more than anything, your own dialogue. And even though I have been definitely deciding when to go into conversation, even just watching what you're engaging in, what kind of conversation you're in, and is it really, go into an evolution of really putting yourself into a positive, like I love being in silence, but also I like talking to children, because there's no ulterior motive there. Yeah. There's a purity there to speak to animals. In that moment of even today walking to the temple, you all of a sudden nature just starts like abundantly like coming out of nowhere. And that stillness becomes like, I was thinking there's so many times when you sit there and you think you have to talk to that person, you've got to make friends with that person because this and that. Do you know who your biggest alliance is yourself? Yeah. And when you sit in that great field of expansion and silence and realize your own being is your greatest alliance, and such an immature word to say really, because we're not looking for alliances, but our egos start looking, our egos start going, oh, we need to be friends, we need to make sure this person's okay, oh my God, is that, no, just sit there, and then you can be fully
present for yourself and other people as well in a different way. What's your favorite thing about being a teacher now?
I love sitting there in a moment of even just teaching like a simple breath work, and that moment that happens. And look, if it doesn't happen at all, just even sharing that space, or even just if someone has that moment and it changes anybody in some way that is helpful to their own being is what's most important. It has nothing to do with me being a teacher, or none of these really practices have I mean, clearly they come from a lineage that is thousands and thousands, and the knowledge is thousands and thousands of years old, and so I'm just a complete expression of that. But if someone is able to learn from that, then that's amazing.
The deeper aspect of yoga is our insides become beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point
to
hone in on.
And by the way, before, when I added that about the knowledge, is more that there's no ego when teaching.
Yeah.
You know, it's not you that's coming up with this information.
And that's a remarkable thing.
It's something else that's doing this stuff. It's not
it's
you
like a
doing it.
That drops in,
So
and it's so interesting.
and you walk away going, great, that, and so you're not attached to the, oh my God, I changed that. You know, person or whatever. It has nothing to do with you.
And
right?
there are teachers who I'm sure we've all been in classes with.
Yeah, so I just don't.
You're like, oh.
What I do respect is the ancient. Like I'm big on looking at. I spent some time up in Badrinath, up in the Himalayas.
Is that like a 5-hour drive from here?
No, it's 15.
15 hours?
Yeah, so it's about 13,000.
Wow.
And you know, you go into the Badrinath temple, and so I'm someone who loves to experience. I love to travel through India. I love going into the temples. I like spending time in there every single day, watching the pujas, which is, you know, a ceremony that's done in the morning and the evenings to really appreciate the and pay respects with, you know, the different elements to the gods. And it's like coming, you know, dinner. You bring food, you bring flowers, you bring water. There's it's that part of it has been a part of my life for a long time before even India. So when I came here and saw that was part of that, especially at Sattva, again, where you get the full aspect. You do puja in the morning. I mean, there is, you know, there's all those access points that you are offered there, if you so choose. If you choose, So, and I think that the rituals are something that is very much a female, and here obviously the men do it. But I think it's a beautiful way to definitely settle my system, and it's something that I really loved when I first came here. When I first came, I didn't do the puja, which was interesting.
But now you're not just participating in puja; you're leading hovens.
Well, I know, but I don't try and get too ego into that.
No, but I love it because it's very, for me, it's witchy. I'm like, whoa, when you sit on 4 a.m. and on the riverbed and it's cold and it's black and there's a fire and we're throwing, you know, the sangria, the things into the fire and we're chanting away. There's such an intense magic around that, right? It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And most Westerners don't get the opportunity to experience that, let alone lead them. Do you know what I mean? So, share your experience.
I mean, my love of fire, because, you know, Agni being fire, that's the name of it here, is
even in the Kali temple, they let you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. But I think what I do have this edge where I do love shadow, because I love digging under and really wanting to go into, I don't want to go for the pretty stuff, and I've always been like that. I want to go and dig underneath and find what is going on. I want to dig up, you know, it's like when I came here after the passing of my mum, I want to go find out what's underneath there. I want to dig deep. So fire I see as this great transformation, and through doing the hovens, especially when we were graduating and feeling that, the chanting, the swaha, you know, when you're constantly letting go and you're doing 108 rounds or however many rounds, you actually come away after 3 or 4 days and you actually feel clean. It's almost like, you know, a baby's bottle, and you get the bottle brush and you've literally cleaned,
scrubbed out
completely. And so it's this whole transformation. When you look at fire and you study it and you see the the smoke and the nature of it, sustaining it, like taking care of it, you know, making sure you're feeding, like this whole
there's a
process.
hypnotic aspect to it too, similarly to if you're at a bonfire or at your home.
We all sit around the campfire.
Fireplace, right? Totally.
So when you do get the pundits that come in and do this, I mean, it's a very powerful Vedic chant. Now, for me to be able to do that, I'm given a mantra to do. Now, when you see the pundits here actually do the havans, their Vedic chanting is incredibly hypnotic and beautiful to see. So if ever you're in India and you get to see, you know, a aarti in the evenings, go, and you'll see it especially in the north too.
What do you absolutely love about yoga? I mean, there's things, so I sort of don't feel like
well, I mean, it goes back to Patanjali's first sutra, which is to yoke. Isn't that what this magazine's called? Yoke
that's
to
right.
the unity, you know, and yes, we can go into the havan, the rituals and the goddesses and who I absolutely love learning about, but bottom line is, this is our temple, this is our inner teacher. We are our own teachers, we are our own light, our own guru. It's about igniting that inner light. So to do that, these processes, whether it's kriya, pranayama, meditation, looking at your own ahimsa, you know, the non-violence, which has a lot to do with beauty. Be non-violent to yourself. Stop saying how bad you look. Stop saying how. Don't be violent to yourself. That is my biggest. Just recently is what I spoke about. We're being violent into our own inner being, and I think when you look at, you know, Patanjali's first sutra, you could study one sutra for the rest of your life. But when you look at his first sutra and says, you know, the unity, stay with that for the rest of your life. Create unity in your own being, and then it only abundantly comes forward, because when there's consistent connection, and that changes, that fluctuates all every day, because there's things that happen in life. So I think that one sutra I would say is my favorite, is to consistently, you know,
remind yourself,
laugh at it too. It's funny. Life is funny ultimately. It's hard, but it's funny.
And that's a beautiful takeaway and a beautiful thing to put out there. To remind people of that, to not hurt themselves.
No, we're violent. It was so violent to our own self.
And to each other, not just ourselves.
Well, I mean, if we're telling each other with our own self that we're not good enough, or we don't look like that, or we do this, like, then our own reaction is going to be outwardly violent.
And that's, again, coming back to what yoke means with union, it's really the union with self. It's the union with self, our internal, this is the divine here. It's not a religion, it's not about God, it's actually the relationship with yourself.
And then get on with your life and be joyful and happy.
And I want to mention that the practice that's being taught is a tantric-based lineage. So, you know, we have many different lineages.
And you can probably clear the Tantra lineage of where we come from is more the active unity from within, of like embracing that unity of both that Shiva Shakti of internally, where there's different lineages.
There's the left hand and there's the right hand, and there's different, so we have totally different aspects of Tantra as well. But this is not a drinking blood out of skulls kind of Tantra experience.
Or doing,
or doing other, No, this is really about nature and connecting with ourselves as the microcosm and the macrocosm, that we're one in the same. And that's what I love. It's incredible.
It's a beautiful lineage, and the Himalayan Tantra lineage is beautiful, and the Vedanta, the knowledge, you know, read the sutras, look at the Upanishads. They're incredible texts, and they're overwhelming at first, but just read one sutra and sit with that.
So do you have final thoughts on yoga and beauty and grace and India? I mean,
India, it's transformational. I mean, for some people it might be here, for some people it might be South America. Wherever you find that deep connection to what elevates you, that when you hit the ground, you feel this somewhat of an expansion, you're home and you start growing. And I mean, for me, India's been that place, but I don't want people to feel limited, because there may be some other expression of that. So, I mean, Peru's beautiful, you know, there's so many different ways to your entry point. So find that place and find that connection, or just start with the elements, you know, that they're right here. They're right here, and we can see them, so there's no dogma attached to them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome.
Thank you. I love
chatting.
you.
Oh, here we are on the rock. We don't flop.
Thank you, Tatyanna. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Thank you.